Hey, good evening, everyone. How you doing? I'm Lee Love, and this is another episode of Photo Mentor TV. Glad you could join us tonight. If you're joining us live, that's terrific. I always love to see you on here and ask your questions live. If not, if you're watching on the replay, that's cool too. Always something to learn, and hopefully, if you can, we can answer your questions as well, or questions maybe you were thinking about asking. You can also reach us if you want at help@photomentor.tv. If you have a question or something that you want to ask us, maybe watching on the replay, feel free to send us an email. I'll do my best to answer it directly, or maybe answer it on next week's show. So anyway, glad you could join us again. We're here every week on Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Eastern. And I guess now, because of the time change here in the U.S., it's 2 o'clock or 0200 Universal Coordinated Time. So if you're in other parts of the world. The purpose of this show and the reason that I started it was I just got so many people were asking me questions, and I just honestly saw so much bad and wrong information out there that I decided that this was a great opportunity to help new and young photographers and help encourage you, mentor new photographers, educate them using my real-world experience, decades of real-world experience as a commercial photographer and director. And so again, that's the purpose of the show. We're glad you're here. I will tell you that next week we're going to have an announcement on something new that I've been working on for quite a while. I'm pretty excited about that, so hopefully you will tune in next week and hear what we're working on there that will help you if you're a new photographer. Again, if you want to ask questions during the show, live questions, I encourage you to do that. You can do that by just leaving a comment on either YouTube or Facebook. We're on both platforms live. And you can go to get to those sites if you're not on Facebook or one of the other. If you want to go to the other site, you can go to facebook.photomentor.tv, or you can go to youtube.photomentor.tv, and that'll just direct you to one of those sites. It just is an easy way to get there instead of typing in some long URL. Now, today, this is the first Friday of the month, so that makes it the first Friday photo review. Whoops, wrong one here. Let's see, 8. Sorry. Once every the first Friday of the month, I do a photo review where people that want to submit their images. You can submit up to 3 images per month, of course, because we do this only once a month. The reviews are anonymous, so if you're a new photographer, don't have to worry about being embarrassed or anything like that. My goal is to encourage you, not to discourage you, so feel free to do that. And as you'll see when I'm getting into some of the reviews, I'll just use letters and some numbers to designate the image that I'm reviewing. I'll take a look at the images on 3 categories. Composition, which of course is the most important in my opinion. Technical, expertise, whether it's technically accurate or not, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with being a little bit off one way or the other. We can always fix that, or encourage you to show you how to make your adjustments to your camera to take care of that. And of course, subject matter. Now, when I say subject matter, what I'm looking for there is how well did you sell the story? How well did you communicate what it was you were trying to show the viewer? If it's confusing and it's hard to understand exactly what's in the image or where I'm supposed to look, then that will affect the composition, of course, and the subject matter. As I said, we do this once a month, the first Friday of the month, which is today. And encourage you to send in your images. If you want to do that, if you want to participate, feel free to send an email to help@photomentor.tv. And with the subject line, I appreciate if you put the word review in there, and that'll separate it out from all the other email that we get. And I will send you instructions on how to submit the photos and get them reviewed for next month's review. So anyway, I guess that's that. I'm going to be doing something a little different. My setup here is a little different as far as being able to bring the images online. I'm still not, I'll be honest with you, I still have not found the perfect software. Maybe somebody else knows how to do it. But I'm looking for a specific capability within, so basically like a telestrator, so I can draw on the image, but it's got to be a little more than that. And I haven't found one yet. I've tried a few things on the iPad, didn't quite work. I'm going to try something a little different here tonight. We'll just see how that goes. So anyway, all right, so let's look at our first image and see how this goes. So this is the first image. It was submitted by DS, and DS has anywhere from 0 to 3 years of experience. I like to find out how much experience you have, so therefore it helps me in, looking at the image and determining where I think you could be as far as capabilities, that type of stuff. Okay, so this is the first image that DS submitted, and it's okay. It's a little flat looking as far as technically the lighting. Look, first of all, it's hard. You got a really cute baby. Babies are really sweet. It's hard to, if this is a mother, I'm sure she would love this image. I'm looking at it as a photographer, of course, so that's a little bit different. But this is the first picture, and I would say that it's a little too tight as far as in my concern in the way it's framed, as far as to making it artistic looking. So it again, when I look at an image like this, I'm looking to see if it works or not as far as what you're trying to do. I think this might have actually could have been a vertical picture, man, but it's obviously been cropped. So anyway, so it's okay. It's just nothing really spectacular about the picture, and I'd say to keep kind of working on it. But there's some better ones here. So this is the other one. This one's getting closer, much closer. And the reason I say that is there's a couple of things going on here that make it really kind of nice. First of all, there is there's some lighting in here. See how there's some light here, and then a little bit of shadow under here, and so that really makes a big difference as far as giving some shape. You got to remember, we're taking we're looking at a 3-dimensional world, and we're trying to record it with a 2-dimensional device. So the goal is to try and use depth of field, use color, you can use lighting to give it some depth and to give it some shape. And that's really what you're trying to do here. So as far as that's concerned, I think the lighting on this is perfect. It's nice, a little bit of depth of field there, shallow, falls out of focus out here, so it shows, the child, but it still gives gives your eye is focused directly on the subject, which is really what you're looking for here. Now, the one thing, so I think the subject works on this one. I think this is really actually a pretty good picture. The one thing I would tell you that I think might be able to be done a little better on this one, that would be to kind of enhance it a little bit. Let's see here if I have this. So let's see how this works. So the other thing you could do is see how it's framed here and here. I think what might have made it work a little bit better, and again, what you're trying to do is draw the viewer's attention. You're trying to draw the viewer to the subject. So what I think might have been a little nicer or that might have made it more interesting is if you'd have put some more foreground in here. In other words, so you could have made this a little, so you could have put more of the blanket or the bedding or whatever the child is on in the foreground, and then that way gotten down a little lower, and that would have drawn your attention. Think of it like a landscape almost, where you want something in the foreground, you want to draw your eye to that. So this isn't going to do a great job, but I'll kind of show them. So it's almost like this, except there would be more down here at the bottom, to draw your attention to that. So anyway, I wouldn't crop it like this. I'd just say there's needs to be a little bit more at the top, at the bottom there, to kind of make it a little more interesting. So anyway, good picture. Definitely works a little better than the other one did, and good job on that. Let's see here. Okay, so here's the next one. Now I made an exception on this one. This is 3 pictures, but I included 4, and I'll tell you why in a minute. This is a child's foot. Now look, baby's feet are adorable. It's cute. I'm sure there's no detail shots are good though. Something like this where you're taking a shot very close up and a detail shot is really a good idea. My question is, and I'm not a mother, so therefore I've been called a mother before, but I'm not. The question I have is, would hands have been a better subject? I don't know, but I know hands are a little more emotional or a little more communicative, and I would think that a tight shot of the hands might have worked a little better than the foot. I'm not sure about that. So anyway. And then here's the 4th one that I added to it. I forgot why I added this one now. I guess because I felt that, again, it's a little closer to what I was talking about before, where, let's see here. Let's take the angle out of this, and the aspect ratio out. Sorry. See if I can get this by not doing that. Whoops, I want that. See if I can rotate this. I'm trying to get her to rotate. I can show you what I'm talking about here. Yeah, it's going to crop in anyway. It's not going to work. So, what I would like, what if you'd have brought it in a little closer, where it would have, you're using this foreground here, but at an angle, like I was talking about before in this picture right here. If you'd have had that foreground in there, and then like you do in this picture right here, I think that would have worked a little better, because it would have then allowed you to draw the viewer's attention into the subject. Anyway, so it's just, but they're good idea. Lighting's a little soft, which is nice, which you want. But it looks like maybe it's available light or window light. It could be. And it looks like it could be a crop. But anyway, very, very cute baby. Certainly, I'm sure the mother is very happy with that. So anyway, that's what I think of, where I think of what works and what doesn't work on the DSO3 images. And I think you could work a little more on that. Again, get down lower. Try and draw your attention to the subject by putting something in the foreground. And I think that would help a little bit. But other than that, you're doing good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I would try maybe taking a white card or reflector and maybe try and bounce a little bit of light into the face a little bit and see if that makes it pop a little bit more. Just try it. I don't know if it would work or not. You have to, a lot of this is experimenting, but I think that tends to make the image, gives a little more depth to the image if you had a little bit of highlights. So anyway, good deal. All right, so on the next one, let me show you this next one here. On this next one, this one was submitted by BK and O1. BK, I don't think has been. I think they are also a year or less, or pretty close to that in photography. This is the first of 2 images that they submitted, and it's not bad. It's a typical sky. I'm sure when you see the second one, you'll understand probably why they photographed this. I'm sure the clouds were very interesting, but there's not much story here. I mean, you could go through and technically you could enhance it a little bit by, bringing up the saturation a little bit, make it a little more vibrant, adding a little bit of contrast always tends to make the colors pop a little bit. But other than that, it's really not much, there's not much there to to work with. But this next picture, now this one is hard to beat. This one is pretty impressive. And no matter if you're a photographer or not, it's I can't imagine seeing this right there on the road, and especially if you're somebody that chases storms or something, I can see where that would be. You'd be heading right for it. But that's a very impressive picture. Again, not much to say about this one. It's just, I think if I were gonna, as far as maybe just do some a little bit of work on it as far as working or editing it, I might again bring up the contrast a little bit. Might come in here, and there's a lot of things you can do with an image like this, as far as bring this in here like this, and maybe make the sky a little more dramatic, and therefore to kind of a little more ominous. But it's a great picture, and I don't know any other way you could have photographed this picture. It might be a little bit more down here in the bottom would have been nice, but hey, let's face it, this is pretty freaky to be seeing this in real time, in real person. So I don't know if I would have had the wherewithal to actually do anything differently with it. But it's so this is a great picture. It's got some elements of composition to it that work. There's a rule of thirds here. I don't know if you guys can see this, a little grid. It's very, very faint, unfortunately. This is kind of see where it would really, I don't know that I would do anything to this picture other than, again, cropping it wouldn't really help, because then you'd lose some of the impact. So, anyway, very impressive storm. Pretty freaky, actually. So, nice shot on this one for BK. Nice image on that. Good work. Love to know the story behind that one. I'm sure there's a lot of something going on there that we'd like to know about. There's a lot of people that do storm photography. One of them is Mike Obaleski, I think is Mike's last name. He does some very impressive time lapse and some work like that where he's does storm chasing, and you ought to check out his. He's on YouTube. Got some really cool stuff that's really inspiring. So anyway, if you're into that or just even watching it, it's pretty impressive to see what these guys do. I know there's a lot of work that goes involved in it, because you're taking thousands and thousands and thousands of frames to be able to do time lapse. Plus, you're chasing a storm that you're not exactly sure where it's going to be, so it's easy to miss where you're supposed to be. So anyway, very, very cool. All right, so let's look at the next one. This is another interesting picture here. So this was submitted by FN submitted this one, and this person's been photographing for over 5 years, or right around 5 years, and so there's some things that really work about this image that make it fantastic, and I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about here. Like, for example, this is something you want to look for when you're photographing a subject, especially like this. And this is sort of what I was talking about before. So if you look, this there's the image here can really bring my brush. You can see how the make it so brighter for you. Okay. See how how this person has used the corner here. So they've taken what's called a leading line, where you've taken the image and they've started right here in the very corner of the picture, and it draws it right out like this. And so therefore your eye is naturally looks at this corner and is drawn right to the boats. So this is a really good technique. It's something I enjoy doing as well. So anytime you can use the corners of the image, one thing I tell people is that when I'm working with new photographers is that before you push that button, look at all four corners of the screen. So look up here, okay, look down here, and then look over here to see if there's anything that either should be there or should not be there. Now, what you can do is so for example, you could move just 6 inches or less, and therefore that would put you that would put this right here in the corner. But if you're not careful, I've seen a lot of people will miss this, and it won't be in the corner. Now you can kind of fix it a little bit by cropping the images. Sometimes you can actually crop it to get it in that corner where you say like where you want it to, if it misses it. But let me just show you what I'm talking about. So if you look at this crop, it's okay, but it's not nearly as interesting, and it doesn't work as well as if you crop it this way, where you use that corner of the shoreline there to draw your eye. Now, this person did a great job, because what they also did, not only did they include the shoreline, but they backed up enough or were in a position so you can still see the reflection of the boats, which makes it also more interesting. Anyway, so that part works. So the composition on this is pretty good. It's kind of a flat image. There's not technically, there's not much there. It's overcast. What are you going to do? Right? There's not much sky there. But again, and it's just a technique thing, depending on what kind of technique you like. And I tend to be, kind of make it a little more dramatic. So for me, I would make it something like more like that. Bring that in there like that. And maybe add a little clarity to it. You can also bring down something like that, maybe a little bit overdone, but you can see it. Certainly the difference is, the reason that works for me is that it separates the background from the foreground. So the foreground, otherwise, if you reset it here, foreground is almost the same luminance as the background. There's not much difference here. But by taking and dragging this down and making the foreground and making a little more, making the background a little darker, okay, then your eye is really drawn now to the ships more than anything. And you could do the same thing by adding one here, maybe to this, and taking and bringing the exposure down a little bit on this right here. And so you can see when you do that, okay, now even though there's a leading line, you still are drawing. Now there's a big separation between the ships, the sky, and the foreground. So in my opinion, it really kind of enhances a little bit. The other thing I may, and you'd have to play with this to see what makes sense, is that you could possibly take and paint in here some saturation. I'll kind of overdo it so you can just kind of see what I'm talking about. See, by taking in here and making this I'm overdoing it just so you can tell the difference, so you can see where it is. But so now if you turn that on or off, there's off and there's on. Like I said, it's probably a little too much, but you can see it does make a change there. And you could also go in and maybe change the contrast on that a little bit. And anyway, so that's kind of one option that that you could have done on this one, FN, and be able to maybe make it, it works. The composition works. I think the subject works. Technically, it just could be a little bit of enhancement to kind of bring out more of what you're trying to do. You're a storyteller here. So you're trying, and this is one thing that I try and tell people. It's all what you want. We're not photocopiers. And I think that's the mistake a lot of people make. They think, okay, great, I can take this picture, but I don't really want to do anything to it, because then it's not pure or natural or whatever. But the way I look at it is that darkroom part is the other 50% of the photograph. And in fact, while we're talking about that, I wanted to mention something. So here's a quote by Ansel Adams. I wanted to give you, and I know I quote him a lot, but it says, "You don't make a photograph just with a camera. You bring the act of photography with all the pictures you've seen, the books you've read, the music you've heard, and the people you've loved." And what he's trying to say here is we're unique. We bring our history to every photograph. Two of us could be standing side by side with the same cameras, and our images are going to look different because we see the world differently. And so you want to add that to all your images. You want to bring, that's what makes your images unique. And that's what you want people to see, and that's actually why you want them to hire you or ask you to photograph something, because you bring a unique vision to a subject. The way you photograph it can be very different than the way I photograph it. And so it's the same thing with this image right here. The way I interpret it and the way I would add to it and make changes to it would maybe different, very different than the person that submitted it did. But that doesn't mean it's right or wrong. There's some rules that we can follow to make an image more appealing. But from there, it's really an issue of how you see the world and what your vision is and what you want to bring to it. So anyway, that's just, I want to get on that soapbox, but it's a big one, because I think a lot of photographers, one mistake I see is a lot of photographers, new and old, focus so much on the technology and not on the story, not on the art, not on what they're trying to say. And if an image doesn't communicate something to me, then what's the point? Now, I may not interpret it the same way you meant it. That's different. But there should still be your vision of what you're trying to get across. Now, don't get me wrong. I know a lot of people try to be different and wacky just to be different and wacky, and that's okay. But if it still doesn't work, if the image still doesn't convey what you're trying to get across or something get across, then I think it fails. And that's really what I'm trying to do here, is not tell you which image is right or wrong. I'm just trying to give you some interpretation of what works and what doesn't work, given some basic guidelines. So if you understand those rules and those guidelines, then you know what to throw out and use and not use. Okay, so hope that was helpful. The next image is one of my, kind of a cool one, and it's called Fog. And one of the things I love about this picture and this image, and one thing that works, is I really love taking images of fog. Fog is very intriguing to me. The difficulty is that you'll find, and it's the same with smoke, fog really has to almost be backlit to make it work, because otherwise you just don't have much contrast there. This is kind of a cool image here. I'd love to, I assume it's from some kind of a trestle or overpass. And you can almost see up here on the right, there's a power line, and that's in there. And you could probably come in here, and if you wanted, you could probably bring that out a little bit by bringing up the contrast. And well, okay, that's not going to work that way. So, okay. And yeah, that's not going to do it that way. You have to do a little soft brush. But anyway, the point is that this is pretty cool image. I think, again, the same thing. You could add a little contrast in from the bottom to make it even a little more dramatic. Okay, and so kind of separate, that's a little too much, separate the foreground from the background. But I like it a lot. But as you can see, the problem with photographing fog is there's not much you can do here in the top and the detail side. It's hard to get any kind of, see if I can bring any of that out. Yeah, a little bit. Anyway, it's just a cool picture. It's very cool. Would be neat if there was something here in the middle. I'm not a big, generally what you want to do when you're trying to do an image is you want to kind of try and think of it in rule of thirds, something like this. And I don't know if you can see these real faint lines in here, but this one is kind of works because it's symmetrical, and I don't think you have to do that. Could work a little bit like that too, but I'm not sure, because then you lose your tower. But You'd have to play with it to see. But actually, now that I look at it, I think it works a little better when you do crop it like this, because what happens is it actually brings my attention over here to these poles. So you could bring it in a little bit like that. Anyway, just an option. I don't know. So again, you'd have to play with it, but it's still a pretty cool image. I like fog a lot, and but it's a tough thing to photograph. So anyway, FN, I think you did a good job on this one. I do think though that this one is a better image here, and a little more interesting because your eye is looking around the frame, and it recognizes this and it sees this. But this one is certainly very artistic, and obviously you do it in black. It's in black and white, and you could maybe mess with it a little bit to get a little more impact out of it. But anyway, very cool, very cool. Reset that back. So there's what it looked like before. Okay, I hope that helped a little bit. Again, if you're interested in submitting some images for next month, you can submit up to 3 images a month. As you've noticed, the reviews are anonymous, so I don't use your name. So if you're a new photographer, that's okay. Nothing wrong, right? Again, I'm just trying to encourage you to give you some different perspectives on maybe how you can use your images to get more out of them. Try and look at it, whether they work compositionally, technically, and whether the subject works. Again, we'll do this every Friday, the first Friday of the month. Not every Friday. For every Friday we're here, but the first Friday of the month is when we do the first photo review. And if you'd like to participate, be sure and send some images and to send an email to help@photomentor.tv with the word review in the subject, and that'll be a big help. So, all right, let's see what we got going on here. We've got a couple of questions. That's not it. And I've got a question here from Keith. And Keith wants to know, is the Canon Rebel T6 better than the PowerShot? Yeah, so Keith, the way it works is that on the Canon product line, the Rebel series or the EOS series is their DSLRs, and the PowerShot is their point and shoot cameras. So you're going to get a better image out of the T6. It's a newer camera probably, although they have T7 and T8 now, but still T6 is a pretty good entry-level camera. There's a T6 and a T6i. The i had a little more video capability, I believe, than the T6 does. But the T6 is still a good lens. It's got an interchangeable lenses, which means you can put a telephoto on there, or you could put a wide-angle lens or a macro lens, so you can take that one camera and use it for a lot of different things. Now, the sensor is a little bigger on that one, so the image quality is going to be a little better, a little more, a little better color. And the thing I would look at is what the ISO range is on the T6. Probably 6400 maybe at the top end, because it's a little older camera. So, but it's also going to be less noise than the PowerShot because the sensor's bigger. So you're going to get a little better performance out of that as well. So if you've got access to a T6, that would be the way I would go if I were you. Okay. So let's see what we got here. First up, the other question we have tonight is from Marilyn, and Marilyn wants to know. Marilyn wants to know, can someone give me some information to blur water, especially a waterfall? I really love that look. So Marilyn, the way that works is that the reason that there is blur is because you're using a slow shutter speed. And so you want to probably you can shoot on shutter priority if you wanted. Didn't say if you had a Canon or a Nikon, but it would be S for the Nikon, and S, I think it's TV, sorry, for the Canon, for time value. So you set that on that, and then you can set what the shutter speed or what the time you want is, and then let the camera pick the shutter speed. Now, to get really smooth water, you're probably going to have to be at least, well, you can start at 15th of a second, but I think you're going to want to be at least 1 or 2 seconds to get that really nice soft water. Now, here's the problem. So if you're doing this in the middle of the day, you're talking about doing a waterfall, then you can't do a waterfall in the middle of the day because it's going to be too bright. And so what happens is there's too much light. So even though you're shooting at 1 or 2 seconds and you've got the lens at f/22 or the smallest opening, and the ISO, the sensitivity of the camera, in other words, at 100 or its lowest it would go, there's still going to be way too much light. So to be able to fix that, you need what's called a neutral density filter. And a neutral density filter blocks some of the light, so therefore you can still shoot at a slow shutter speed and a high aperture. Now, there's kind of two kinds of neutral density filters. There's a fixed, will have like so many, it'll say, okay, this is a 3-stop or 4-stop, and it'll block that much light. And then there's a variable neutral density filter. And a variable neutral density filter is 2 filters, and you can rotate them and continue and block out light on a variable basis. So it generally goes from 0 or maybe 1 stop of light. It's going to block all light. Most of them are about 8 stops of light. And so therefore that's nice, because if you need more, you don't have to have multiple filters, because they can be expensive. You don't need to buy a lot of filters. You can use one filter and just adjust it for the amount of light you want to be able to use. I should have a picture here, but I don't. The other thing that's nice about a neutral density filter, and especially a variable one, is if you're doing portraiture. Let's say you want to shoot, somebody you want to photograph outdoors, and you want that nice blurry bokeh, that background out of focus. Well, if you're trying to shoot at 2.8 or something like that, then you have to use a fast shutter speed. There would be the opposite. There you would put your camera on AV for aperture value, or if it's a Nikon, you put it on A and set the aperture to be 2.8 or whatever the fastest, the biggest opening of your lens is. And then the camera's going to pick the shutter speed. Well, the problem is if it's bright out, even if the camera is shooting at 4,000 or 8,000th of a second, it's still too much light. So the neutral density filter would allow you to block some of that light and shoot wide open, or shoot at a wider aperture and get that nice blurry background. So that's the other use of a neutral density filter. Now, for those of us that also shoot video, in the video world, it's a neutral density filter is pretty common. I mean, you almost have to have one. I won't go into all the technical reasons, but basically your shutter speed is typically fixed when you're shooting video, and so therefore you can't adjust the shutter speed. And that's a whole nother subject of how that works. But the point is, you don't have that option. So therefore you only have 2 things you can change: the aperture and the ISO. So therefore you're limited. And if you want to shoot, again, at a nice wide aperture and get a little bit of a shallow depth of field, you can't do that because you can't adjust the shutter speed. And again, your ISO is only going to be whatever it's limited to. So anyway, point is, neutral density filter is what you want, variable, and something to go up maybe at 8 stops of block, 8 stops of light. One other tip I'll give you is that you can, if you get the largest neutral density filter you can afford, typically a 77 millimeter or an 82 millimeter. You're like, well, why would I do that? Because it won't fit on my lens. My lens is only 52, 58, 67 millimeter. Well, what you can do is you can get a step down ring, and it's a ring that will go from and take 77 or 82 or whatever and bring that down to whatever size. So let's say you had a 58 millimeter lens. If you get a 77 millimeter filter and a ring that will go from 77 to 52, then you can use that one filter on the 52 millimeter. But let's say now you buy another lens, or you want to use it on a different lens. Let's say a lens that has a 67 millimeter. Well, now you can, for $10, right around $10, you can get a ring that will step down from 77 to 67 or 62 or whatever the size is. And therefore, you only have to buy one filter because they can be rather expensive, especially if you get a really good one. And therefore, you don't want to be buying multiple of those every time you change lenses. So that's a tip that may help you out on that. Okay, let's see what else we got here. So Christy asked, does anyone use UV or ND filters? There we go. I didn't even know. So yes, you want to. Some people say don't use a UV filter. UV stands for it's just a blocking of the ultraviolet. They don't use. It's not as big a deal anymore. It used to be when the digital cameras first came out, or that when it was we were shooting film, there was a skylight filter. It was the same kind of thing, and it would block some of those UV rays. Well, nowadays the sensors are not sensitive to that, so it doesn't help that much as far as UV, but it does protect the front of the lens. And again, there's some debate about that. I don't use it on all my lenses. Like my 50 millimeter, I don't put it on because it's such a good lens, and I don't really want anything in between there to be able to impair the quality. But also, some of these lenses are not that expensive, so therefore I can get away if I have to damage the front of it. But the purpose of a UV filter, for the most part, is to protect the front of the glass. So, what lens do I have on this camera right here? Yeah. So here is a 50 millimeter. Okay. And so what happened? So you want to use a lens hood first of all. That's the first thing, because the lens hood will protect that, so you can't get anything. It won't bump into anything and break the lens. But the problem is you can also get dirt and stuff on here. I've known people that have had taken their camera to the beach and they've got sunscreen and all kinds of things on there. And you got to be careful, because depending on what you clean this with, you can take some of the coatings off and damage the front of the lens. So you got to be very, very careful. You don't want to use alcohol or anything like that. And so anyway, the point is having a clear UV filter. If you get dirt or grit or smear some kind of oil on there, it's easy to clean the filter, or even if you ruin that filter, you can replace it. Now, here's the drawback. You want to make sure it's a good quality filter, because you got a really, really sharp lens and you put a cheap filter on there. I've had a lot of people say, oh, I just need something to protect it. They don't seem to understand that it's not just protecting it, but it can also, again, come impede the quality of the image. So therefore, you want to be able to have a good quality filter on there if you're going to have one on there. So anyway, or just be very careful and don't protect your lens. Don't damage your lens. The the question is also about the ND filter. I think we've kind of covered that. You definitely want to if you're going to put a filter on your camera, you just want to make sure it's a good quality filter and it's not going to, damage the quality of the lens. Like that, I think that lens, that 50 millimeter, is about a $400 or $500 lens. I've got some lenses that are, $2,000, $2,700 lenses. I don't want to put a $20 filter on there, because what's the point? Now all I'm doing is taking that and I'm ruining the quality of my images, and there's focusing problems and things like that. One caution is, I've noticed a lot of people will look on, especially it seems to be on Amazon, they'll have these kits with all these lenses you can buy, or cameras you can buy. It'll come with tripods and all these filters and screw-on wide-angle devices. Those things will do nothing but absolutely ruin the quality of your images. So do not buy those cheap lens kits, because those filters are no good and the adapters are no good either. And you're just going to ruin your images. So you're better off not having anything like that at all. Anyway, all right. So Nicole asked, just wondering if anyone makes a client sign a consent form. I'm just starting it up, and I'm wondering if I should do this. Like someone says they can use these social media or not. Okay. So again, I need to have an attorney come on. I'm working on that on a whole nother project. But anyway, because I'm not an attorney, but I can tell you one thing. As soon as you push that shutter, you own those images. They're yours. You can do with what you want with them. But of course, we're in a society that can sue for anything. So you got to be careful. So it's not a matter of do you own the rights to use the images. It's a matter of are they going to be, are they going to sue you for it? So if you can get someone to sign a model release is what you're looking for. A model release will then say you can use the images for certain purposes or whatever. But what I would do is if you can get a model release, even if it's just a simple one that says you're just going to use it for marketing purposes, because if you get really great images, you want to be able to use those images to market to other clients. So, what you can't do, though, without a model release is you cannot use those images for editorial, meaning a magazine, or you cannot use them for advertising. So let's say you shot a really cool picture and Nike wants to buy the image. They'll come to you and say, hey, we love this image. We saw it on your Instagram feed. We want to buy it. Okay, do you have a model release? No, I don't. Well, then they won't buy it. They're attorneys. There's no way they would get near it. So you can't, even though you own the rights to it, you cannot use it for certain things without the person's permission. So, a model release would be great. I'd try and get one for every client that you photograph, just to be safe. But if you can't get one, you can't get one. It shouldn't stop you from being able to use it though on social media and for marketing. Okay. I'm doing my first celebrity. This is from Melissa. Melissa says, I'm doing my first celebrity photo event. I need a software that works with a green screen, be able to change the background and print on the spot. Any suggestions? My suggestion is don't do it. I know you're probably excited about this event. I would have a tough time even doing this myself. And I'll tell you why. I've done a number of events where we've printed on site. First of all, printing can be a nightmare on site. Most of the printers are inkjet. They're not very fast. You have people waiting. I wouldn't do it without having two printers running at the same time so you can speed up the process. Lightroom and some programs will let you print to two printers simultaneously, meaning this image can go to this printer, this image can go to that printer. When you see people doing this at events for real money, they're typically using a dye sub printer, and a dye sub printer is very, very fast. It'll print out a print, some of them in a couple of seconds, and it uses a cartridge. It's a special ink cartridge. They're expensive. I mean, they can be a couple $1,000s, I believe. I haven't looked in a long time. You can rent them even for events. So it's just not a good idea. I've done it. There are times when you can do it, but it's problematic, and it means you definitely need to have somebody just manning that printer and working on that. The green screen part adds a whole nother level of complexity because now you have somebody that now you have software that has to be doing the editing to take out that green screen and be able to post-process the image, then send it to the person that's doing the printing. It can be problematic. You want to have the person away from that background 7 to 10 feet if possible, because what happens is that green with the light on it bounces onto the edges of the person, and it's really next to impossible to remove. And so you also got to have a good quality software, Photoshop, and there's some specialty products that'll do it for you. But it can be really problematic. I'm not sure I would have taken this job on, not without having done it first. I mean, I've done green screen work in video, and the trick is you have to have the background lit perfectly even. But again, they've got to be far enough away from that background, and usually you don't have a lot of room at an event to work on something like this. So any light the green glow from that background is going to bounce off that background and onto the subject if they're too close. So good luck, Melissa. Don't know if I have more suggestions on that one. I apologize. Gary asks, should I use a gray card for balance when shooting with flash strobes? Yes, absolutely. You could use a gray card anytime. Just put that gray card up. A gray card is it's calibrated color. It's what's called 18% gray. You put that on in front of the subject where the lighting is, on the front of the face or down below. Take one shot first. It's your first shot. You can just have them hold it. And then go on about your business. And then when you come back into post-processing, you can take that eyedropper of the white balance if you're shooting raw You can take that eyedropper, click on that gray, and it'll make it perfectly white balance. Now, so I'm saying, yes, you should do that. It's a good idea. Some people are saying, oh, well, strobes are calibrated for 5600 Kelvin or some number. Well, they may or may not be exactly correct. I mean, that may be what the manufacturer says, but you don't know if that's going to be exactly the situation. Also, you could have mixed lighting conditions where you have ambient light, fluorescent light, daylight, whatever, and flash. And so therefore you can have a mixed lighting condition. Now, having said that, though, the only time I really concentrate on that, and I shoot anytime I make a change in the lighting, I shoot another frame. I don't use actually I don't use a gray card. What I use, where is it? I thought it was back here. Oh, here it is. So for video, we use something like this. Okay. And this has gray on it. This is what a gray card looks like, though. And this is 18% gray. And this is what you'd use for white balance. It's made by a company called X-Rite. They're pretty much the leader in that area. But then I'll also do what's called a chip chart. And this will give me skin tones. Well, it would be skin tones over here, I guess. And then these are calibrated for video. But anyway, there's a similar chart like this that you can get for photography, and that gives you a little more control over it. But the point is that the only time I really care about that for the most part is if I'm photographing products or clothing, where I know, like because of product photography, their colors have to be right on the money. I mean, typically there may even be what's called a Pantone color for clothing that has to match. Or if I know I'm going to go into a catalog and the images are going to go next to each other, you want to make sure that they're exactly the same. So that's the time that I'm really concerned about doing a real accurate white balance. Now, the reason I say it's not that big of a deal in other applications, especially if you're photographing people, is because what I found is an accurate white balance can be pretty sterile or ugly looking. It's just not that great of an image. It makes it just not very flattering, I guess is the word I'm trying to say, for photographing people. So therefore, I may use a gray card, get an accurate white balance, but then from there I may want to warm it up or cool it down. Probably warm it up if I've got photographing people, because it just doesn't look quite that right. So it doesn't look right. So the point is, having accurate white balance may be a good thing to start with, but you may want to change it from there, is what I'm trying to say. I hope that helps, Nick. I don't know if it does or not. Okay. So it was Nick, right? Gary. Sorry, Gary. Okay, I'm editing in Lightroom Classic. It keeps storing all my images on my photos on my hard drive and eating up my storage on my laptop. Does anyone know a way around this? Yes, absolutely. You should not be storing your images on your internal hard drive, whether it's a laptop or desktop or whatever. You want to store your images on an external drive. And when you do that, Lightroom will move. When you import them, you tell Lightroom, okay, I want to import these images off my card. And then I want to import them, though I want to import them onto my external hard drive, not to the internal drive. Now, one of the things that bugs me about Lightroom is that it defaults to the internal photo or the internal drive. So if you're a Mac or PC, it's going to try and put them in your pictures folder automatically. So you got to watch that very carefully. And I have to do a Lightroom session here. And so you have to be very careful about that and make sure it purposely imports them over to the external hard drive. One other caution: if you already have images, which it sounds, Cheyenne, like you do, on your internal hard drive, when you buy that external hard drive and you plug it in, don't just copy the files using, I don't know if you're a Mac or Windows, but just copying the Finder or the Explorer. Don't just copy those files over to the new drive. You have to copy them using Lightroom. If you don't copy, you can copy them within Lightroom. Within Lightroom, there's a way you can just go in and let's see the images, see the folder, drag it from one drive to the other. It'll say, do you want to move these? You say yes. But if you don't do it that way, what happens is Lightroom loses its little brain and it doesn't know where those images are. And all of a sudden, all your images are going to be missing. and you got to go back through and relink them, and it's a nightmare. People pay me lots of money to be able to do that for Lightroom training and fixing their catalog. So just be sure and do it within your within Lightroom. If you move them within Lightroom, you're good to go. Okay. Who has used mirrorless cameras in the cold temperature? Just curious how it went. All cameras are fine, and most cameras have a rating on them. Manufacturers test them to cold temperatures. The two things you got to watch out for, Vanessa, is you want to make sure that that number one, when you move from cold or from indoors to outdoors, the temperature changes, and so therefore you can get moisture in the camera, and so you got to be careful if you're going from a very warm environment to a cold environment, or vice versa if it's in your car and you're bringing it into the hotel or the house. So therefore you got to be careful making that drastic change. Let it cool down, let it adapt to that temperature before you start shooting it, and therefore so that you don't have any humidity or condensation on the lens. The second thing you got to look out for, especially with mirrorless cameras, is the batteries. Batteries in the cold do not do well. You probably get almost half the life you would normally get out of a battery. And of course, mirrorless cameras use more battery anyway. So therefore, you want to be able to make sure you have enough spare batteries. One trick you can do is keep them in your pocket of your coat, or some people will even take a hand warmer, those little things you get from REI or whatever, some outdoor place. You break them, and it warming your hands. Put that in your pocket or in a pouch, and put the battery in that, and that'll keep it warm, and therefore you'll get closer to the amount of battery life that you would expect out of it in a cold temperature. Okay, our last question is from Kendall, and Kendall says, where do you buy your external drives from? Well, we're on a computer kick here tonight. I'm needing another one pretty soon, but don't know where to look for best pricing. Okay, so I have lots of hard drives. I think I have my storage system is about 48 terabytes of storage, because I have a lot of images I've been shooting a long time, and I have video files, and those eat up space. So I've done a lot of research on hard drives and what to use and that type of thing. So the first thing is, hard drives are very similar to the way camera manufacturers work, meaning there are no real great prices. I mean, the price is going to be the price, and it's going to be the same everywhere. People think, oh, I go to Amazon, I'll buy them from there, it's going to be cheaper. I think if you find like a Seagate drive or a Western Digital drive, and you get the exact same model, and you look there, you look at Best Buy, and you look at Micro Center, or I'm trying to think of the other place. Anyway, Newegg, you're going to find the prices are going to be within $3 of each other. So there's not going to be a major price difference between them two, unless the manufacturer does a Black Friday sale or something like that. And then what they do is there's some kind of rebate for the manufacturer, for the reseller, and so therefore the price will go down. But that's done by the manufacturer, because the manufacturer's got more room to give you a bigger discount. So those are the deals you want to look for. But the other thing is the price will be the same everywhere. So when the manufacturer lowers the price, everybody gets that same lower price. Amazon gets that price. Newegg gets that price. Micro Center gets that price. Best Buy gets that price. So the price is going to be the same everywhere. Now, a little word of caution. I ordered 3 8-terabyte drives from Amazon, and they showed up, and 2 of them didn't work. Now, these yahoos took these drives, they threw them in a box, and they just threw that big bubble pack in there with it. It wasn't even packed up, and the drives were just bouncing around in there. It does no wonder that 2 of them didn't work. So I never buy drives anymore from Amazon. Now, they replaced them, that was fine, but then the other 2 that showed up were exactly the same way. Luckily, they worked, but I was scared to death that these things were going to be damaged as well. So I don't know what these yahoos are thinking. They just throw these drives in a box and throw some packing material in there. Definitely not the way to do it. So I would not buy sensitive hard drives from Amazon. I'd buy them from somebody that deals in computer equipment and knows how to pack stuff and make sure they're not going to be damaged. So anyway, that's the deal on that. All right. So again, I want to thank everybody for joining us. Again, had a good time tonight. Hope you got something out of this first Friday review. And I'll mention that to you again, that if you want to have your stuff reviewed, bring in to just submit your stuff. Go ahead and we'll submit the first Friday of every month. Submit 3 images. Reviews are anonymous, so if you're just getting started, don't worry about it. No big deal. They'll be looked at to see how they work best, if they're successful in composition, technical, and subject matter. We do that in the first Friday of the month, as I mentioned. And you can send an email to help@photomentor.tv. The subject will be review. It'll help me tremendously in being able to sort those images, sort your email out from all the other ones that I get. I want to thank everybody for joining me this week. It's been great. And again, hopefully you join us next week. We do this every Friday, as I said before. And sorry here. And I want to remind you something. Again, one thing about the quote from Ansel Adams, and that is, you don't just make a photograph with a camera. You bring all of the act of photography and your pictures you've ever seen, the books you've read, the music you've heard, and the people that you've loved. In other words, what he's saying here is that the art of photography has to do with more than just the camera. It also has to do with your background and your unique talent. And so that has a lot to do with what your pictures are going to look like. So don't forget that. You're an artist, and you want to be able to bring that background, that unique view of the world with you when you make those images. So it's not just about the equipment. It's really more about how you see the world. So anyway, again, thanks very much. I'm glad you joined us, and we'll see you next week.